Rain needles the Bentley's glass as billionaire Jonathan Whitmore checks his phone until a soaked black child steps in front of his car and mouths one word, "Help." When he opens her ruined envelope, a flash drive exposes a secret his empire was built to hide, and a father he thought was dead, still pulling the strings. By the time he realizes the truth, the hunt has already begun. The rain came down like silver needles, whispering against the midnight gloss of the Bentley Mulsanne parked outside Whitmore Tower. Umbrellas bloomed across the plaza as employees hurried past, their reflections rippling across the wet pavement. The tower's mirrored facade stretched into the clouds, bearing the name Whitmore in bold chrome letters, the symbol of everything Jonathan Whitmore had built and everything he believed he controlled. He stepped out of the revolving door, the weight of his morning already pressing through his tailored charcoal suit. The valet sprang forward, opening the Bentley's rear door with a practiced bow. Jonathan didn't look up. His mind was already on the encrypted document waiting in his inbox, the one tagged confidential, Project Lantern. Then a voice. Soft, high, trembling. "Sir?" Jonathan's polished shoes paused mid-step. The voice didn't belong in this world of glass and money. He turned and saw her. A little black girl, no older than 9, standing by the curb in soaked sneakers and a faded blue cardigan. She clutched a brown envelope close to her chest, rain flattening her braids against her small shoulders. Behind her, people slowed their pace, curious. A few pulled out their phones, the way people did when the rich met the poor in public, expecting drama, not decency. The valet, sensing a disturbance, snapped before Jonathan could speak. "Hey, away from the car! Do you even know who this is?" The girl didn't move. Her small hand trembled as she held out the envelope. "I need to give this to Mr. Whitmore." Jonathan blinked, a small line creasing between his brows. He was used to charity requests, investment pitches, desperate letters. But something about her tone, it wasn't pleading, it was controlled, urgent. The valet took a step toward her, voice rising. "I said step back." "Enough," Jonathan cut in quietly. His tone, calm but commanding, stilled the air. "It's fine, I'll take it." The valet froze, stunned, then reluctantly stepped aside. Jonathan approached the girl slowly, his Italian leather shoes tapping softly against the wet pavement. When he reached her, she didn't flinch. She only looked up at him, eyes dark and steady. Up close, he saw the envelope was damp, edges crumpled and smudged with what looked like oil, maybe even soot. Her fingers were raw at the tips, as if she'd been gripping it for hours. "Who sent you?" he asked. She swallowed, her lips trembling. Then she mouthed one word, barely audible over the rain. "Help." Jonathan's pulse flickered. Something about the word, not shouted, not even spoken, mouthed, like she was afraid of being overheard. He glanced around. Several onlookers had gathered under umbrellas, cameras pointed their way. He didn't like that. He took the envelope from her hand, his expression neutral. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Inside, something flat and rigid pressed against the soggy cardboard. He wanted to open it right there, but instinct told him not to. "Who are you?" he pressed. "Where did you get this?" But she had already stepped back, eyes darting toward the street. A black sedan across the road idled with its engine running. Its tinted window lowered slightly, just enough for Jonathan to catch the faint outline of a man watching. Then, in a heartbeat, the window rolled up and the car pulled away. The girl turned and ran. "Wait!" Jonathan called after her, his voice sharper than intended. But she vanished into the blur of umbrellas and traffic, leaving behind only the soft echo of sneakers slapping wet pavement. The valet rushed over. "Sir, should I—" "No," Jonathan snapped. His jaw tightened. "Open the door." He slid into the Bentley's back seat. The familiar scent of leather and cedar hit him, grounding him for a moment. The driver, Marcus, looked through the rearview mirror, uncertain. "Everything all right, sir?" Jonathan stared at the envelope. Rain pattered on the roof. "Just drive." As the Bentley pulled away, he tore the envelope open carefully. Inside was a single flash drive wrapped in a torn piece of notebook paper. On it, in smeared pencil, were 4 words. "Your father isn't dead." Jonathan's throat tightened. His father, Charles Whitmore, had died 15 years ago. A plane crash in the Andes. His death had propelled Jonathan to CEO, given him control of Whitmore Industries. But there, scrawled in a child's handwriting, was a message impossible to ignore. He turned the flash drive over in his hand. No markings, no label, just a cheap plastic shell. He could feel his pulse in his fingertips. "Marcus," he said quietly, "go to the office." "But sir, your meeting with—" "Cancel it." His tone cut like glass. Now, as they drove through the city's slick streets, Jonathan stared out at the towers flashing by, each one a monument to the empire his family had built on secrets. And in the reflection of the glass, for the first time in years, he didn't see power. He saw fear. Back at Whitmore Tower, security cameras caught a last glimpse of the little girl vanishing into the rain, her cardigan soaked, her shoes muddy, the city swallowing her whole. She delivered the message. Now the game had begun. The private elevator rose in silence, carrying Jonathan Whitmore back into the glass heart of his empire. Outside, thunder rolled between skyscrapers, echoing through the steel veins of the city. Inside, the CEO of Whitmore Industries stared at a single object in his hand, a cheap black flash drive that felt heavier than gold. By the time the doors opened onto the 74th floor, his decision was made. No assistants, no witnesses. He strode through the marble hallway, past portraits of his father that seemed to follow him with painted eyes. The lights dimmed automatically as he entered his office, a vast space of polished obsidian, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-slick skyline. Jonathan locked the door behind him. He inserted the flash drive into his encrypted workstation, overriding the security prompt. The screen flickered once, twice, then a hidden directory appeared. A Project Lantern. Confidential files access level. Red. Jonathan froze. That name again, Project Lantern, the same one that had appeared in his morning briefing, buried under layers of restricted clearance. He had brushed it off as routine government contract work. Now it was sitting on his personal desk, smuggled to him by a 9-year-old child. He opened the first file. A series of scanned documents filled the screen. Procurement records, offshore account transfers, a list of experimental sites under subsidiary names. He scrolled further, and his heart began to pound. Project Lantern, Human Neural Interface Trial, 4 billion, subject age, 8 to 12 years. Location, Charleston facility, classified. Status, terminated. Subjects relocated. Photographs accompanied the report. Fuzzy, grainy security stills of small hospital beds lined up in sterile rooms. Monitors attached to children with shaved heads. Wires running into metallic headbands. Some of the faces were obscured, but one wasn't. Jonathan leaned closer. The girl from the street, his breath caught. The cardigan, the envelope, the same steady eyes. He scrolled further. The next file was a video. With a trembling hand, he clicked play. Static. Then a dimly lit room. A young woman in a lab coat stood before the camera, her voice urgent and low. "If you're seeing this, it means the file reached you. They're lying, Jonathan. He's alive. Your father, he's been running Lantern from offshore." Jonathan's chest tightened. "What?" he whispered to no one. The woman looked around nervously before continuing. "Charles Whitmore didn't die in that crash. He faked it after the board voted to halt Lantern's funding. The project was too volatile, too unethical, but he kept it alive, in secret facilities across South Carolina and later overseas." The video glitched. When it returned, the woman's face was closer. The girl, her name is Lila. She escaped the Charleston site 2 weeks ago. She knows what Lantern really is. The screen went black. Jonathan sat there, pulse racing, his reflection ghosted across the dark monitor. It couldn't be true. His father had been a visionary, a ruthless, brilliant pioneer. But this? Experiments on children? A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. A message popped up in the corner of his screen. Incoming call, Marcus Driver. Jonathan answered. "What is it?" "Sir." Marcus's voice came through, tense, low. "There's someone outside the building asking for you again. A man this time. Says it's urgent. Says you'll regret it if you don't come down." Jonathan's gaze flicked to the window. Far below, at street level, the plaza glistened with rain and light. A figure stood under a lamppost, motionless, holding something in his hand. The flash of a lighter illuminated a pale face, sharp features, dark suit. "Keep him there," Jonathan said. "I'm coming down." He grabbed his coat, slipped the flash drive into his pocket, and descended in the elevator again, heart hammering. Each passing floor seemed slower than the last. He stepped out into the lobby, the hum of conversations and footsteps fading into a dull roar. Outside, the man by the lamppost turned as Jonathan approached. His expression was calm, almost casual. "Mr. Whitmore," he said smoothly. You opened the package, I assume? Jonathan stiffened. Who are you? The man smiled faintly. A messenger, like the girl. Except, my message isn't written on paper. He pulled a small device from his pocket and tossed it lightly. Jonathan caught it. A phone. The screen was already playing a video. Footage from inside a dim laboratory. Rows of children, their eyes closed, wires trailing from their temples. A voice off-screen said, Subject 23, neural link stabilizing. Increase voltage. The child convulsed. Jonathan's hand trembled. Where did you get this? From your father, the man replied. He's been waiting for you to stop pretending you don't know what your company really does. Lightning split the sky above them, washing the tower in white. Jonathan's reflection glared back at him from the glass door. A powerful man suddenly made small by a truth too large to control. Why tell me this? He demanded. The stranger pocketed his lighter. Because she's not safe, Jonathan. The girl who gave you that drive, Lila, they're hunting her, and if you don't move fast, she won't live to tell the rest. Jonathan stared as the man turned and melted into the rain-soaked crowd. His mind was a storm of disbelief and guilt, of old memories twisting into something monstrous. He looked down at the phone again, then back at the tower, at the name Whitmore gleaming across the entrance like a threat. For the first time in years, Jonathan wasn't sure if he still wanted to be his father's son. Rain kept falling long into the night, washing the city in silver streaks and siren reflections. From his penthouse suite high above Whitmore Tower, Jonathan Whitmore stood at the window, staring down at the endless blur of headlights. The flash drive lay on the desk behind him, beside the phone the stranger had given him. The video still burned in his mind. Those children, those wires, and the unmistakable voice in the background that he now feared might belong to his father. He hadn't slept. Every instinct told him to delete everything, pretend none of it existed. But something deeper, an ache he couldn't name, kept whispering, find her. Find the girl. Jonathan turned toward his desk. The flash drive blinked faintly as though alive. He plugged it in again and searched for more hidden files. A new folder appeared, one he hadn't seen before. Lila01 inside was a scanned hospital intake form. Name, Lila Owens. Age, 9. Status, escaped containment. Beneath it, a note written in his father's handwriting. Subject shows elevated neural activity. Connection stable. Keep under observation. Jonathan's stomach turned. His father had never written personal notes on corporate files. The scrawled line at the bottom made his throat tighten. If she surfaces, bring her home. He slammed the laptop shut. Bring her home? He muttered aloud. What does that mean? The intercom buzzed, startling him. It was Marcus, his driver. Sir, you told me to monitor the surveillance feeds. I think I found something. Jonathan's pulse spiked. Go on. She's here, sir. The girl. Outside the alley behind the tower. Security's not seen her yet, but she's alone. Jonathan grabbed his coat and rushed for the private elevator. He didn't even call for backup. Something in him refused to let anyone else near her. When he reached the ground floor, the rain had slowed to a mist. He slipped through the service corridor and out into the alley, a narrow, dim stretch between the tower and a parking structure. And there she was. Lila sat curled behind a dumpster, shivering, hugging her knees. The brown envelope she'd once carried was gone. Her sneakers were caked with mud, her face streaked with rain and exhaustion. When she looked up, her eyes flinched with fear, but recognition softened them. You came, she whispered. Jonathan crouched beside her. Lila, right? She nodded faintly. Who's chasing you? Who sent that message? She hesitated, biting her lip. He said you'd help me, that you're not like him. Jonathan's chest tightened. Who? Your father. The name hit him like a slap. He searched her face, desperate for some sign of confusion, a mistake, but her gaze didn't waver. My father's dead, he said automatically. She shook her head slowly. No. He talks to the doctors in the dark rooms. I heard them say, Mr. Whitmore wants results by Friday. I saw his face on the screens. Her voice cracked. He tells them to make the children quiet. Jonathan's breath came shallow. He looked around. The alley was still empty. Lila, how did you get out? Her hands trembled as she spoke. A woman helped me. Dr. Miles. She said you were the only one who could stop it. She said your father wanted to use the machine on me because my brain could talk to it. Talk to what? The lantern, she said simply. The big machine that makes the lights in people's heads. It hurts when it's on. Some kids don't wake up after. Jonathan stood, pacing in disbelief. That's impossible. Neural integration tech doesn't exist yet, not outside prototypes. Lila's eyes followed him. He made it real. He just didn't tell you. Thunder rumbled far off. Jonathan looked back toward the tower, his tower, and felt the weight of every lie he'd inherited. "We can't stay here," he said finally. "They'll be looking for you. Come with me." She hesitated. "They said you'd take me back." "I'm not them," he said, kneeling again, his voice low, sincere. "You trusted me once already. Do it one more time." After a long pause, Lila took his hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling, but strong. Jonathan led her through the underground parking exit and into his car. Marcus waited, eyes wide when he saw the girl. "Sir, drive," Jonathan ordered. "Now." As the Bentley slid into the night, Jonathan glanced at Lila in the rear seat. She was staring out the window, her reflection ghosted against the glass. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "To find Dr. Miles," he said. "If she's alive, she's our only link to my father, and to whatever Lantern really is." Lila hugged herself tighter. She said if they find her, they'll make her forget everything. Jonathan frowned. "Make her forget?" She nodded. "They have a way to erase memories. They call it cleaning." A chill ran down his spine. He thought of the offshore accounts, the encrypted files, the billions quietly funneled into biotech research. He'd signed off on those budgets without a second thought. As they sped through the rain, a black SUV pulled out 2 blocks behind them. Its headlights dimmed, keeping distance. Jonathan noticed it in the rearview mirror and cursed under his breath. "They've found us," he muttered. Marcus accelerated. "Hang on, sir." Lila clutched the seat, fear flaring in her eyes. "Don't worry," Jonathan said, watching the SUV close in. "I'm not losing you." Not like this. Behind them, the city lights blurred into streaks of blue and red, and for the first time in his life, Jonathan Whitmore, the billionaire who thought he controlled everything, was running from his own empire. But deep inside him, beneath the fear and disbelief, a spark of something dangerous had awakened. If his father was still alive, then Jonathan wasn't just going to expose him, he was going to end him. The Bentley cut through the night like a black arrow, its wipers struggling against the pounding rain. Downtown gave way to the outskirts, abandoned industrial blocks where neon signs flickered and puddles mirrored broken glass. Inside, Jonathan's grip on the door handle was white-knuckled. Lila sat beside him, staring silently at her soaked sneakers. Behind them, the black SUV stayed close. Too close. Marcus glanced at the rearview mirror. "Sir, they're not backing off. Take the back roads," Jonathan ordered. "I know where we're going." The destination glowed in his mind like a curse. A location buried deep in one of the Project Lantern files. Charleston facility, marked decommissioned, but Jonathan knew his father's habits. Nothing Charles Whitmore ever created was truly shut down. Lightning split the sky as they turned off the highway onto a narrow coastal road flanked by marshland. The SUV followed for a mile, then 2. Jonathan saw headlights dim, then vanish entirely. Marcus exhaled shakily. "Lost them." Jonathan shook his head. No one loses Whitmore security that easily. They reached a rusted gate set between crumbling brick pillars. A faded sign read, "Whitmore Biomedical Testing Grounds, Restricted Access." Jonathan stepped out, scanning the padlock. He pulled a small keyring from his coat pocket. His father had given it to him years ago as a token of legacy. One key bore the company crest. He tried it. The lock clicked open. Inside, the compound was a maze of silent warehouses and half-lit corridors. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air. Machines hummed behind glass partitions, and somewhere far below, faint voices echoed. Lila clutched his sleeve. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where we lived." Jonathan turned sharply toward her. "You mean they kept you here?" She nodded, eyes wide with remembered fear. "They said it was to fix our brains, but they were using us." He swallowed hard. "Then we're ending it tonight." They moved deeper through the corridor until they reached a steel elevator. A card reader blinked red beside the door. Jonathan held the flash drive to the scanner, an old engineer's trick, and the light turned green. The doors slid open, revealing a shaft descending into darkness. "Basement level," he murmured. "That's where Lantern was built." The elevator descended silently. As it slowed, Lila gripped his hand tighter. "You hear that?" she whispered. A hum, faint at first, then growing. a rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat made of electricity. When the doors opened, Jonathan froze. The room beyond glowed faint blue, walls lined with transparent pods filled with fluid. Inside each pod floated a child, motionless, wires sprouting from headbands and spines. At the far end, a massive ring of machinery pulsed with energy, the lantern core. Lila gasped. They said it gives him control. Who? Jonathan whispered. Before she could answer, a voice echoed across the chamber. Calm, commanding. Me! Jonathan spun around. From the shadows emerged a tall man in a white lab coat, his silver hair slicked back, face pale but unmistakable. Charles Whitmore. Jonathan stumbled back. You're supposed to be dead. Charles smiled faintly. Death is a tool, my son, one I used to save our legacy. Jonathan's chest heaved. You built this? I perfected it, Charles said, gesturing toward the glowing ring. Project Lantern is the next step in human evolution. Neural merging, pure thought transmitted across bodies. No sickness, no pain, no dissent. Those are children, Jonathan snarled. Charles's expression hardened. They are conduits, vessels for progress. Every empire demands sacrifice, Jonathan. You, of all people, should understand that. Jonathan's voice shook. You're insane. No, Charles said quietly. I'm eternal. He turned toward a control panel, typing commands. The lantern core brightened, filling the chamber with blinding light. Lila screamed as arcs of blue electricity jumped across the floor. The pods vibrated violently. Stop it! Jonathan shouted, lunging forward. Guards appeared from side doors, rifles raised. Charles didn't look at them. Take the girl. She's the key to stabilizing the network. Jonathan stepped in front of her. You'll touch her over my dead body. Charles smiled coldly. If that's what it takes. One of the guards moved closer and was suddenly thrown backward as sparks erupted from the control panel. Lila's eyes glowed faintly blue. Her voice came out layered, distorted. No more. The lantern core screamed with energy. Every pod shattered, releasing streams of light that swirled toward Lila, surrounding her in a halo. Charles stumbled backward, horror dawning on his face. What have you done? Jonathan shielded his eyes. Lila, stop! But it wasn't rage she was channeling, it was freedom. The light engulfed the machines, burning away cables, screens, everything. The facility trembled as systems failed. Charles fell to his knees, his empire crumbling around him. Lila turned to Jonathan, tears cutting clean tracks down her face. It's over. He nodded, pulling her close as alarms blared. Let's go. They ran toward the elevator, heat rising behind them. The last thing Jonathan saw before the doors closed was his father's silhouette reaching toward the core, his obsession consuming him whole. When they emerged outside, the compound erupted in a silent bloom of white light. Then darkness. Hours later, dawn broke over the marshes. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Jonathan stood beside the Bentley, Lila wrapped in a blanket as she sipped water. Marcus approached. Sir, what do we tell them? Jonathan looked toward the smoke rising from the ruins. Tell them the truth. Marcus frowned. Which part of it? The part where a man finally stopped being his father's shadow. Lila looked up at him, eyes tired but steady. What happens to me now? Jonathan knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. You're safe, and you'll never be a project again. She smiled faintly. You promise? I do, he said quietly. Behind them, the morning light touched the ashes of Whitmore Tower's empire. What had begun with one word, help, had ended with another whispered truth, freedom always has a cost. But this time, Jonathan was ready to pay it.